Hi, on the Woodpecker today. We're spending almost 4 weeks at the cottage to make some preparation for a future project. I'd like to build a shelter similar to this at the cottage, so I can store my excavator there. It's a pretty big project, which means that we have quite a lot of things to bring, not just in the trailer, but also in the truck bed. Once at the cottage, as I expected, my pile of logs prevents me from backing up any farther. But it's not a big deal, because I still manage to empty the 18 bags of cement, 2 sheets of plywood, and 12 concrete blocks. The logs are quite big, but the two of us managed to move them so I can park the trailer farther away, which gives me access to the truck bed to unload the saw. It works fairly well until I try to gently lower it onto the ground. But we still manage to get the saw onto its rails. It's now time to move the excavator because we need to get the truck over to shovel sand for the concrete we're going to make. In total, we filled 24 buckets with sand. Back at the cottage, I empty all of them onto a tarp. Actually, we still need them because we need to get some rocks. For that, I found a spot with plenty of rocks, the size I need, and together we filled all the buckets. It took 20 minutes to collect the sand and 2 hours for the rocks. But when it was all in the truck, we could take them to the cottage. That's when the site preparation begins. We start by clearing away all the branches we had put there. When it's done, I thought it would be smart to just pull on the trees and they would uproot by themselves. In any case, one falls gracefully onto my saw. But getting them uprooted is another story. So for the other trees, I just cut them down. After removing all the branches and cutting the trees into logs, I can cut the roots and pull out the stumps. For the third one, I use my excavator. Before continuing our work, we decide to repair this section of our road. So we head back to get more sand. Then we can fill the holes. But an incident disrupts the rest of our stay. Renee falls off the truck and injures herself. Okay, even with less than 50% of her abilities, she is still capable of more than most adults half her age. You will see. The next day, it's time to remove the roots and level the ground. Since it's pretty much just the excavator doing the work, René can rest a bit. I remove everything I can to create an even surface. Then I compact everything. Using the rope we put around the perimeter, I plant stakes inside. Since it's quite late, I use a laser I brought to mark all the posts. That's the last thing we do for the day. The next day, I put the stakes in from the outside. I also dig a trench for a pipe that I can use to run electrical wires. To fish a rope through, I use the advice I got last year. I don't have any wool, but I sure have a lot of fishing line. I have to admit that using the vacuum cleaner is much easier than any of the other techniques I've used before. All I have to do is pull a proper rope out of the pipe and I can continue with my forms. In fact, since all the posts are in place, all that's left to do is to screw the 2x4s into position and the forms are ready. But I have a slight problem. In some places, the concrete might leak out. So I need to fix that. But first, I need to do something to be able to walk over the forms. Okay, now I can use soil to seal the holes. Okay, it's done, but I'm not quite finished yet with the forms. I need to add some rebar. Using the trailer to bend them works really well. After putting the rebars in place, they need to be tied together. It's too late to pour the concrete now, but we can clean some of the blocks. I bring the blocks to Renée and she cleans them. But it's too hard for her. She stops after this pile. But there are quite a few others to clean as well. So I take care of removing the old mortar while Renée takes care of the moss. At the end of the day, we have this pile of large blocks and this one of small blocks. The next day, it's time to mix the concrete. My rocks are quite large, so after 3 wheelbarrows of concrete, I make one without rocks and smooth the top. there it is. The work is done. All that's left to do is to wait for the concrete to cure. In the meantime, I move all the large blocks closer so I don't have to walk too far on the next day. I also cut all the broken blocks so they will only have straight sides. The following day, I remove the forms. I use 4 blocks to represent the square of the shelter. I mark the corners and drill holes for screws. After that, it's very easy to mark the outside. Now I can mix mortar to set the blocks. We start with the 2 small blocks at the front. For the sides, I use the wider blocks. Otherwise, I won't have enough blocks. I place the blocks and René fills the space between them. When the right side is finished, we start on the left. At the end of the day, we haven't finished the first row. But in my defense, I had also moved this whole stack of blocks before starting the work. The next day, we continue laying the blocks. We don't manage to finish, but at least we're making progress. The next day, we finished our 3rd row of blocks. But something was bothering me. The wasps and mice could make nests in the holes of the white blocks. So I mix some very runny concrete and fill all the holes. Finally, the concrete part of the work is done. It had taken quite a few days. The following day, I start by backfilling the pipe trench and cutting the logs. For my first day, I focus on the smaller logs and cut some long 2x4s. Here's what I managed to cut on the first day. I continue the same work on the next day. I managed to get all the 4x4s I need and a few shorter 2x4s. On the 3rd day, I start working on the pile of larger logs that I had brought in the parking lot during the winter. Since the logs are much bigger, I start to cut planks. Some of the logs are quite heavy and difficult to load onto the saw. On the other end, the cutting goes very well once it's in place, much faster than with my old chainsaw mill. By the end of the 4th day, I have a few boards and all the 2x4s that I'll need. But all this wood is getting in the way, so I start stacking it. On the 5th day, I tackle the biggest, longest logs. Luckily, I had that PV. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to move that log. It's so heavy that I can't even get it onto the saw. I make a makeshift ramp and manage. All that's left to do is make boards. I'm short of long 2x4s, so I keep the center to cut 5 of them. Here's everything I managed to cut on my 5th day. But before going any further, I temporarily stack all the boards I've cut so far and cover them just in case. On my 6th day of cutting wood, I managed to cut all these boards. Here's all the logs I have left. I won't use them for now, but I kept this biggest one to cut a large block. Now we can tackle cutting all the edges of all the boards. Here are all the boards I cut during the day. I also cut these smaller ones. Here are all the boards at the end of the 8th day. I still have all the long wide boards to cut. But actually, I don't need all these long boards. These are what I'll need for the back of the shelter. I can cut the rest for the side walls. After 9 consecutive days of cutting wood, I have this nice pile of roof and wall boards. I also have these slightly shorter boards, which will be perfect for the roof. This is the bark pile. It's quite impressive. But I do have one small regret. I was only able to go for a walk with Louis once. We'll have to try again another time. But at least we have a good portion ready. Unfortunately, I don't have enough planks, just enough to get started. But that will be for another episode of the Woodpecker.